Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. I'm available to do a quick video here. I've got the place to myself, and I wanted to alert you to a video or a podcast that I appeared on recently. Dan Schneider's got a long-running podcast, and I was asked to be on that with a writer by the name of Bill Kopp. Bill is a writer for Goldmine Magazine, and the reason I was brought on, we were asked to talk about Todd Rundgren and the Nazz. And Bill Kopp has interviewed Todd Rundgren 7 times, and Dan Schneider handpicked both of us to talk about the topic because I had done a video on the Nazz, and Bill was pretty well versed with Todd Rundgren's catalog and having interviewed him so many times. So I'm going to leave a link to that discussion down below. So if you liked the Nazz video I did on the history of the Nazz, you may like this one as well. So we open up and talk a little more about Rundgren in that video. One thing I wanted to do here, since I had such good response from the survey that I put out there on the reasons why the Beatles broke up, we had nearly 1,000 people take part in that survey. I've got some other ideas for people to partake in, and the one thing I wanted to do, and I thought I'd bring this up now, is one of the things that's fascinated me is had the Beatles been able to do like one more album, what that would have sounded like. So really, there's another question that's a part of that for me, which is what Beatles song or what solo Beatles song do you wish the Beatles had recorded? And some songs lend themselves more to the Beatles' style and sound than others, obviously. So what I wanted to do with this exercise was to have people who are interested in partaking in this is to choose one song by each of the solo Beatles that you think would have made a fine Beatles song, the song you wish the Beatles had recorded. So I want you to do one from John, one from Paul, one from George, and one from Ringo. And I'll let you throw in a 5th one. That'll be a wild card of your choice. So, I guess that wild card could even be a song the ex-Beatles didn't even write. Maybe a cover song. So I'll leave that up to you. But I do want to limit this to the 1970s. So that's the only parameter I will put on in addition to the quantity. And I think it's always a fun way to talk about that what if. And I'm interested to see, I know what I think, but what do you think? Let's get some tabulations here on the songs people feel would have made a really great Beatles song. So that's one thing I wanted to do. The other thing I wanted to talk about was I will be going into more Beatles solo material, and this stretches me into the 1970s and beyond. I typically, as you know, this is a 60s channel, and I still will keep the focus on 60s stuff, but I may venture into a couple 70s topics. Obviously, the Beatles solo years will get me there, and I've done a couple of those already, notably with John Heaton. We did 33 1/3 by George Harrison. We did Sometime in New York City by John and Yoko. And then we did Paul McCartney and Linda McCartney's Ram. Now, with regard to me delving into the 70s a bit, a lot of these 60s bands I'll be doing band histories of, they obviously have careers that go well into the 70s and sometimes beyond. And typically, I won't put as much emphasis on the 70s. I'll maybe wrap it up in a much more brief way, because I want to focus on the 60s because for a lot of reasons, because that's just the era that I'm fascinated with. And generally speaking, I mean, we do find most 60s bands that don't make it into the 70s. They stumble across the finish line, and it's usually they fade out and they're passing the torch to other bands that came after them. And that's pretty normal with the exception of just a few. So I've got a couple band histories coming up, though I'll be doing that. And so that'll be challenging because I know many of you sometimes want me to go into the 70s and 80s. I mean, some of you want me to go into the talk about the touring members of today. I'm not going to do that. I just don't think there's any story there at all. The fact that they're still playing live is commendable, but I think that's coming to a close too as everybody gets so much older. So, as I've stated before, I don't go to many live shows anymore. I've seen so many, and I've gave my screams and my money and bought the albums, and these older folks that are in their 70s and now 80s still touring, it's just, the quality isn't there. And I don't need to be I don't need to see them in person anymore. I don't need to be in their presence in that way. So that's why I pull back from that. It gives me more time to do this kind of thing and to look more critically at the work from their heyday, from their golden periods. So having the idea of going into the 70s and talking about the solo Beatles, I'm going to warn you that I'm going to be looking at these solo Beatles with quite a critical eye. And in the Beatle world, this is not usually accepted warmly. And I think that most of my viewers know me, have seen enough of my videos that will understand that I'll do it with as balanced of an approach as I can and call it for what it is. I mean, I can't pretend to like something I don't. I will not try to pass something off to you that I think isn't good, and I'm not going to say that it's good when I think that it's not good. I realize that some people may disagree with some of that. Perfectly understandable, perfectly fine. But I want to draw attention to the flow of the success of bands who have their time, and that time when it's over, we shouldn't pretend that when that's over that it's still their time, that they're still making great music 25 years after the fact. I don't buy that. It's not to say that they can't make good music, but those are the kind of things I'm going to be challenging viewers on with regard to the Beatles solo catalog. And there are a lot of bright spots, but I think there's a lot of low spots too. And I'm just getting beyond, my viewers here seem to be getting beyond, they can take criticism of their heroes' music, which is good. And I love all the artists that I cover, I love. Doesn't mean that I love everything they do, and doesn't mean that I'm going to try to tell you that it's good when it isn't. And some of it is personal preference. Obviously, I find mostly you could take the worst album, take a lousy album of your choice in your head, and somebody probably loves it. And I don't have a problem with anybody loving it. There's all kinds of stuff I love that most people are going to say, you love that? And I grew up listening to the music outside of the generation I was from. So I was used to getting ridiculed for what I listened to. And oftentimes, even more recently, people, they insist on listening to new music now. Even people my age. And they think that to not do that, there's something wrong with that, which I find silly. I think you should just listen to what you like. And that should really be the deciding factor. I remember in the 90s, back in my single days, I had a roommate. We used to throw these great parties and stuff. And he had a pretty good music collection as well. So together we could put together a pretty good playlist for a party. And at that time, I was still buying contemporary music. And some of it I liked. This was the grunge period, and some of that I did like. And I was buying some stuff because I wanted to have some current music to offer when I had people over. I couldn't just play all old stuff. My musical collection wasn't as eclectic then. And I couldn't pass it off as such. I was too young. I didn't know anything. So I was buying contemporary stuff to keep up with the times and to offer that. But it occurred to me that, well, I didn't have a bottomless wallet. Like, why am I spending money on this shit for? Why don't I just spend the money on the stuff that really is meaningful to me? And that is when I started to really focus on the research aspect of 60s music. I mean, I still bought stuff from all genres. I like quite a bit of 40s music. The music of today I usually prefer to see and hear live. I do download some stuff, some more recent stuff. I was tempted to do a video on recent music I like, but I don't know that I will. Usually when I rip on current music, and usually when I do that, I'm talking about mainstream music. There's a lot of great music today being recorded and being written, because I hear it. It's just not in the mainstream. And when I say mainstream music sucks, people hear that as all new music sucks, and they try to argue with me on a point I'm not making. So I may do that. I may offer some, and to me, new music is basically 21st century music. And Obviously it's taken over 20 years already. It's hard to believe. But anyway, those are just some topics that I'd be interested to hear if that would be something you guys would be interested in hearing about, any new kind of music. And there is some good stuff out there. But I will certainly be focusing on the 60s, and there's a lot of 60s stuff I have planned that might be new to you anyway. It's bands you probably never heard of. I just did a video on the Charlatans. I had a lot of comments saying, I've never heard of this band. I really like this band, or I've never heard of this band. This band really sucks, But I mean, there's a history to it that we can put into context with other 60s bands, which I find really interesting. I can't do that with today's music. I have no context. I have no perspective yet of where this is all going. Well, I have an idea, but I could be wrong. It could be the greatest music ever made, right? But so that's why it's easy for me to do this stuff from over 25 years ago, because it's just, we have the perspective, we have all this other music that came out we can compare it to during that time. So that's why, one of the reasons why I really look back at this decade, in addition to really loving it. So anyway, that is a brief update of what I've got going on. So check out the podcast that I was on with Dan Schneider, where we talk about Todd Rundgren and the Nazz. That was with writer Bill Kopp. And I've got a link below also to my latest survey. That is where you're going to help choose the songs that you wish the Beatles had recorded that were done in their solo career. That's a 5-question survey. You can do it in 30 seconds, and I'll be back in a couple weeks and give you all the data that you guys chose that you wish the Beatles had recorded. So have some fun with it, and I will be back here on Pop Goes the 60s.